Hey, good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim, to another edition of our Zera Shimshon Shiur of the Sunday mornings. Shiur should be for the zchut, as the Zera Shimshon himself writes in his Hakdama, of Zera Shel Kayama for all those who need Zera Shel Kayama, specifically for Eldad ben Yaakov, Bracha bat Marcel Dina, Benyamin ben Reuben, Devorah bat Rachel, and all the other ones who are waiting for Zera Shel Kayama. Hashem should bless them with Zera Shel Kayama. Amen. Amen. All those who need Shidduchim, which he also mentions there, Bezat Hashem, should be a zchut for them to find their zivug bimhera. Amen. Amen. Today's learning has also been sponsored for the Hatzlacha of all Chayei Israel in the current situation, specifically the soldiers Eliasaf ben Shoshana, Ori ben Shoshana, Adriel Haim ben Rachel Michel, and for the Aliyat Neshama of those fallen soldiers, specifically Aliyat Neshama of Michael ben Meir, Ruach Hashem tenihenu began Eden. Amen. Okay, so this week's parasha actually has a lot to do with Shidduchim, because the parasha opens with Chayei Zera, which means after Sarah Imenu passed away, at the end of Parashat Vayera, Parashat Chayei Zera opens with the eulogy of Avraham Avinu for his beloved wife Sarah Imenu. And the Midrash says, Isha Yirat Hashem hi tithalal, which is the last part of Eshet Chayil in Mishlei, in the last chapter of Mishlei, Perek Lamed Aleph. Says the Midrash, this Zu Sarah, Isha Yirat Hashem hi tithalal, that the woman that has Yirat Shamayim is the praised one, is talking about Sarah Imenu. Indeed, he does not bring it Zera Shimshon over here, but the Midrash says in Tanchuma Dalit that Avraham Avinu, in his eulogy for Sarah, he went through all the parts of Eshet Chayil, all the psukim of Eshet Chayil, Mi'imtza, V'rachok B'peninim, Michra, Batach Ba'ala, all of those amazing things that are mentioned in Eshet Chayil are the things that Avraham Avinu said in the Hesped, in the eulogy that he said for Sarah Imenu. Hence, it is of course important to go through Eshet Chayil to learn about Sarah Imenu. And that's exactly what he does. Zera Shimshon and this week's parasha is 95% a perush on Eshet Chayil in regards to Sarah Imenu, and then he has maybe 2 pages at the end on a different topic. It only has 2 chapters basically, and the first chapter is massive, going through the entire Eshet Chayil. We're not, of course, going to get through all of that. We're probably going to only focus on the first pasuk of Eshet Chayil, Mi'imtza, and says the Nefesh, says the Zera Shimshon, Zu Sarah, because it says Ba'ala nit'ater ba, she was like a crown on the head of Avraham Avinu, uberuach hakodesh sheba. We all know that Avraham Avinu was tafel to Sarah Imenu in Ruach HaKodesh. She had a higher level of Ruach HaKodesh from even Avraham Avinu. How do we know that? Because there was a dispute, a major dispute between Avraham Avinu and Sarah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu took sides. This is the one of the first feminist moves of the Torah. The Torah says, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shema bekolah. Whatever Sarah tells you, shema bekolah, which Malbim writes, bekolah means when it's benevuah. Versus Malbim differentiates in this, and Adam HaRishon that says, sheshamata lekol ishtecha. That's leko bekolah means when it is beruach hakodesh, it's an indication of nevuah. So you see that the nevuah of the level of Ruach HaKodesh of Sarah Imenu was even higher than Avraham Avinu. And now he's coming to eulogize her. So says the Zera Shimshon, because of this Midrash, Nefar lichvodah, in the honor of Sarah Imenu, Nefaresh kol Parashat Eshet Chayil. We're going to go through all of Eshet Chayil. ואחר כך נבוא לביאור הפרשה. Fine. So, says the Zera Shimshon, Eshet Chayei Mimsa has a major problem with the first pasuk of Eshet Chayei Mimsa. Because what does he mean? Eshet Chayei Mimsa, who could find the Eshet Chayei? Which indicates nobody could find the Eshet Chayei. Right? Who, to be exact, grammatically correct, who will find an Eshet Chayei? Which indicates nobody will find an Eshet Chayei. So says Zera Shimshon, wait 1 second, Mima nafshach? Is there Eshet Chayei in the world? Or is there no Eshet Chayei in the world? Because if there is Eshet Chayei in the world, and you're saying, of course, she's going to marry somebody, so someone is going to find. And if there is no Eshet Chayei to be found, so then, of course, it's a rhetorical question. You're basically saying there is no Eshet Chayei in the world. So make your mind, how does that work exactly? Kashe, demima nafshach, im yesh Eshet Chayei ba'olam, if you have it, then eze adam imtzaena, somebody is going to find her. Veim lo yesh ba'olam Eshet Chayei, and if there are no Eshet Chayei, then pshita she'efshar limatza, of course you can find. It's a simple question that he starts with. But then it gets even worse. In 6th chapter of Yevamot, on page 63, Daf Samech Gimal, Amud Bet, the Gemara says the following: B'Ma'arava, in Eretz Yisrael, when someone would get married, people would go to him and they would ask him the following question. This is a very uncomfortable question. Like, you see, the culture has changed drastically. They would go to him and say, by the way, matzah or motzeh? Is it a matzah or is it a motzeh? Right? So now, matzah or motzeh just means found or will find. But really, it's a reference to two different psukim. The pasuk says in Mishlei one thing, and in Kohelet a different thing. The pasuk says in Mishlei Perek Yudchet, Matzah isha matzatov v'yafek ratzon me'Hashem. That a person that found a wife has found true good in his life. V'yafek ratzon me'Hashem. Hashem forgives his avonot. The Gemara says in Brachot, a lot of good. That sounds pretty amazing, right? But that's only when you read Mishlei, right? When you get to later on in Tanakh and you read Kohelet, then it becomes a little different. It says, Motzeh ani mar mimavet et haisha. I found one thing that's worse than death. It's more bitter than the death itself, and that's wife, that's a woman. That's what Shlomo HaMelech says, and we read it in Kohelet, right? So it says a verbiage of matzah is associated with the pasuk of matzah isha matzatov, a good wife, and motzeh is associated with a bad experience of marriage. Motzeh ani mar mimavet et haisha. So they would ask him, they would say, matzah or motzeh? Is it matzah your wife or is it motzeh? Right. So first of all, how long does it take for a person to know their wife? I don't know. Someone has to Google it. Probably will say 50 years. Like, those who have been married for 50 years, they'll tell you, I still don't know, right? So it's like, how are you going to? Then day after marriage, you go to him and you say matzah or motzeh. What kind of question is that? That's first of all. Secondly, mima nafshach. If he found a good wife, so then he found a good wife. So what's the point that you're asking? And if the point of question is that you're giving him two options, that maybe his wife is not good, that's like body shaming. What is he going to do about it? Right? What is he going to do? Well, you're coming to give him nechama and you're messiah him more. Right? You're reminding him that it's a question, maybe your wife is not so good. And if it's not so good, what is he going to say? Right? I never forget when I was very young, one of my friends was complaining to me about his wife, and he was going on and on. I'm a good listener, so he was going for a good 15-20 minutes. Like, you would think that this is like the great-grandmother of Vashti, right? Mamash. Like, at the end when he was done, I wanted to ask, why did you marry her? Of course I didn't say that. So I was like, okay, I hear. And he looks at me and said, what do you mean you hear? I didn't come here for you to tell me to divorce my wife. I'm like, what do you want from my life? Like, you have problems with it. It's not unsolvable issues. Then go to a therapist. But that's the issue. You asking him, matzah or motzeh, and what do you expect him to say exactly? What's the point of the ma'arava? And that's the question of Zera Shimshon. What's the benefit of asking this question? Mima nafshach, what do you want? She'im hi isha tova, if it's a good wife, gam belo divrehem tova, he doesn't need you, so she's good. But chas v'shalom, God forbid, if she's bad, v'himatzah isha ra'ah, then ma be'ado shel zeh la'asot. What do you want him to do? You're asking him a question the day after his wedding. Atu lenechume seurika mesaret. Is that a nechama? You're hurting him, right? Or not devarim, right? Actually, the Gemara says in Masechet Ketuvot, it's machloket bet Hillel and bet Shammai. Imagine somebody went through the Genesis book of records of ugly people, and he married her, right? And you go to the wedding, you're invited to the wedding. What do you say? Can you say, Kala na'ava chasuda, what a beautiful wife? So Bet Shammai say, no, you can't say that because she's ugly, right? And Bet Hillel say, no, you go there, he likes her. So you go, you say, Kala na'ava chasuda, a beautiful, amazing, wonderful wife, right? So what exactly is happening over here is the question of Zera Shimshon. It's a very valid question. So he says that I don't have this question. Now, I want to mention that what Zera Shimshon says is almost identically mentioned also in Khatam Sofer. Khatam Sofer writes this in the name of his Rebbe. But nevertheless, says the Zera Shimshon, I understand the Gemara completely differently. This is not after the marriage. This is before the marriage. Before he decides to get engaged to this girl, we ask him the following. We tell him when he comes to get engaged, we ask him, is it matzah or motzeh? And what does that mean, matzah or motzeh? Says the Zera Shimshon, kavanatam hayta lish'ol leoto chatan. The point of the question is, did you daven for this woman, or did it come to you automatically? Because he understands that if it's something that you had to daven and you had to push the system of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make it happen, then it's not necessarily a good thing, right? I'll explain this in just a moment. This is where it becomes a little bit very interesting. It's one of the most interesting topics, but it's a little complicated. You have to keep your mind on all the chazals and pieces of Gemara that have been mentioned in different parts of Shas. So I'll mention a few. One issue that I have, I'll just put this in parentheses with the Zera Shimshon, which I don't have a good answer for, is to me it seems that Zera Shimshon stands in sharp contrast to the Gemara. The Gemara says in Masechet Brachot Daf Chet, on page 8, Daf Chet Amud Aleph, Gemara says a pasuk in Tehillim, in Perek Lamed Bet Pasuk Vav, that the pasuk there says, Al zot yitpalel kol chasid le'et metzo. On this, every chasid, every righteous man should be davening. And Gemara says, on what? And Gemara has different options. The very first option of the Gemara on what a person should always be davening is Amar Rabbi Chalila Zu Isha. You want to know what you should be davening for all the time? To find a good wife. Shene'emar, as it says, and it brings the pasuk in Mishlei Yudchet that we mentioned earlier, Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov ve'afak ratzon min Hashem. Right? You should daven to find a good spouse, a good wife. So it seems to be that is it a good thing or is it a bad thing to daven for a wife? It's something that you should be doing, right? But on the other hand, there is an element, and I'll try maybe to answer the Zera Shimshon with this. There is an element that's mentioned in the Gemara in Masechet Moed Katan on page 18. Daf Yud Chet. The Mishnah there says, in Moed Katan, a person could be meshadech, a woman could get engaged on Chol HaMoed. It's okay. Even though that normally speaking, you won't allow them to get married. But engagement, mutar. Why? Because if you don't get engaged and grab her, maybe somebody else is going to get her. Shema yakademenu acher. Maybe if you found a good wife, grab it, right? Grab the opportunity, get engaged right away, right? Secure the marriage, and then you get married after Chol HaMoed, after the Moed. But now, do it. The Gemara says, what do you mean that somebody else could get my wife if it's meant to be for me? I thought the Gemara elsewhere says that that's never going to happen. Where is that Gemara? In the very first page of Masechet Sotah, Daf Bet Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, 40 yom kodem yetzirat havelat, 40 days before the child is born, they announce an official announcement in Shamayim. They say, Bat Peloni le Peloni. The daughter of so-and-so is going to marry so-and-so. It's already predetermined. Right? Predetermined. So you can't take someone else's designated spouse. That's what the Gemara asks in Moed Katan, page 18. Right? The Gemara says, correct. Usually it doesn't happen like that. But, Shema yekademenu acher berachami. With tefillah, maybe you could do it. Now, this is, to my knowledge, is a three-way machloket rishonim, a three-way dispute between the rishonim and Evils, what exactly this means. According to much of them, we're talking about Rashi, the Rif on Yaakov, and the Ritba. According to some rishonim, it doesn't happen by itself, but if you daven hard, it will happen. It doesn't mean that's going to be a good shidduch. You're going to have trouble. There's going to be shalom bayit issues later on down the road. According to Rashi, even that's not going to happen. Shema Rachamim means you daven and you say, if this woman, I can't marry her, she should die. Or I should die and not see her get married to someone else. I want her so badly that I can't witness somebody else marrying her. So that tefillah may work, but actually making it work in a wedding, in a marriage, it's not going to work. Right? So each one of the Rishonim understands that Gemara, but you understand that davening for a specific woman, it's not necessarily a good thing. And the Gemara even brings the story of Rava. Rava, one of the Amoraim, sees this guy that is like crying in his tefillah, is, every day davening for 5 hours, and he's saying, Hashem, I want this girl, right? A specific girl. And Rava waits there, he finishes tefillah, he says, don't daven like this, right? Please don't daven like. Why? Because if it's for you, it's not going to go away from you. And if it's not for you, kafarta bah or kafarta b'Hashem. You are going to hate her, or you're going to deny Hashem because you're not going to get her if it's not for you. And then you say, I davened so much and it didn't happen. Right? So the Gemara seems to indicate that the tefillah of this sort is not a positive tefillah. If I would want to add a little bit to this, I would say that probably is the difference. This is in the pathway that the Zera, Shimshon, and the Khatam Sofer learn. You could even say that it's very meduyak in the pasuk, because the pasuk says, "Matzah isha, matzah tov." Right? If it's isha, there's no specific one. Hakadosh Baruch Hu brought her to me. It's matzah isha, matzah. But motze ani mar mimavet et ha-isha. Grammatically, what does that mean? The woman. If it's the woman, you're davening for this one. I only want this one. I only want this one. And you're davening like that, that may not end up so good. Right? That may not end up so good. And says the Zera Shimshon the following. Now, I want to tell you an insight of myself later on, but let's first go through this Zera Shimshon and try to have like a clear take-home message, Be'ezrat Hashem, together. So it says,
if you're going out with a girl, let's say, are you going to daven that this should work out?
If it's meant to be, right?
So we should never daven for a specific girl.
So you're asking a very important question.
I'm going out. Let's say somebody's going out with a lady and he likes her. So you shouldn't daven that.
If it's meant to be, It should work if it's meant to be. Now, I will tell you something that this is really a massive can of worms. But you asked for it, so maybe we should just talk about this the rest of this year. There's a very strange tshuva from the Rambam. This is the Rambam, right? It's not like one of the Acharim. Rambam writes in a letter that he wrote to Rabbi Ovadiah Ger. It was a Ger Tzedek. He was a Ishmaeli that became a Ger Tzedek. And he wrote 3 questions to the Rambam. We don't have all the back and forth, but we do have the letter of the Rambam to him. The backdrop of the letter is that his rabbi, this Ger Tzedek's rabbi, had a bloody machloket with him, and he called him names, and he basically told him he's a fool. One of the questions that he had, that there was a debate between him and his rabbi, was a very philosophical question. He said, based on the Gemara says, Hakol bidei shamayim, chutz mirat shamayim. Everything is controlled by heaven, by Hashem, aside from yirat shamayim. Yirat shamayim means you get to do the mitzvot. That is in your hand. The rest of the things, what happens, is in the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So says Rabbi Ovadiah Ger to his rabbi, he says, well, marriage is the ultimate Yirat Shamayim, because who you marry has a lot to do with your Yirat Shamayim, right? Shlomo Melech, who was the wisest man, he married Bat Paro and went down, right? He too had levavo. His wives tricked him, fooled the smartest man, and everything spiraled downward, and it caused him his malchut. His kingship was taken away, ripped away from him because of his wives. So, and the Midrash says you marry a good woman, it's tremendous. The Midrash says a couple, the Sadiq, they could have children, so they got divorced after 10 years, and both of them married someone that was not frum, right? So the woman who married the non-frum man, the man became frum, right? But the man who married the non-frum, he became non-frum. The woman could control a whole lot. It's a real power, right? Chachmot nashim banta betah ve'ivelet be'adeh tarsena. The pasuk says a wise woman could really build a house, and a not so wise woman could destroy it. Deliberately destroy. So therefore, he said that it should be my bechira, who I marry. It's not predetermined. And his rabbi trashed him, really called him names, and Rambam very strongly takes this person's side, and he calls his rabbi names. He says he doesn't know anything, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he should be sensitive how he talks to you, and so on and so forth. And he says, for sure, it's in your hand. Now this Rambam seems to stand in contrast with the Gemara that we just mentioned in Masechet Moed Daf Yud Chet. Now there are other issues with the Rambam also, which the Tashbetz, one of the Rishonim in Algeria, he asks in the first Teshuvah of the second volume of his Teshuvot. But this question he does not ask, which is very surprising. It's a big question.
Why can't we just say it's Zivuk Sheni? Zivuk Sheni, it's not.
Well, the Tosfot asked that question. In other words, let me explain what he says. This is became a yeshiva discussion. The Gemara.
What are singles supposed to think? Are we supposed to believe that there's somebody set for me right now, or am I supposed to?
No, I believe a person should go through life thinking that they have to make the best decision. And I'll even give you a Meiri, which is very important. The Meiri writes. So Meiri is one of the great Rishonim, right? The Meiri writes, he said, Bashert is there until you're Bar Bat Mitzvah, right? Because you haven't messed with your Bashert, right? Hashem has chosen a person for you, and that's based on what's best for you. But if you already became a bar bat mitzvah and you made choices in your life, the choices which changed you and your process of life, right? Then it's in your hand. So if you get married early, that's bullshit. Otherwise, which is most people nowadays, they are holding by the second bar mitzvah when they get married. Oh, actually, second bar mitzvah means 83, because after second I mean 26 and up. So then it becomes much more complicated, and that's the Meiri writing this, right? So therefore, all I'm saying is a complicated thing. It's not a simple subject, and hence a person should do their best to do research, to do the best possible thing to marry the right person, right? It's not, saying, but sure, so therefore I'm going to be negligent in my dating process and not do my due diligence and research, and then whatever Yisurim I'm going to go under afterwards is going to be Min HaShamayim, Hashem wanted me to marry this person. That's an irresponsible way of dealing with it, right? Does that make sense? Now, and the Zivug Rishon Sheni is really the Tosfot's question there in Sotah Daf Bet. The Gemara differentiates between the Tosfot doesn't understand why that could not have been the answer to the question of the Gemara in Moed Katan Yud Chet. If you didn't understand what I just said, it's fine, because it's going to take me 5 minutes to explain it, and we don't have that 5 minutes. So therefore, says the Zera Shimshon, it depends on whether or not you had to daven. If you insisted, I want this woman, then the או אם זאת האישה בת לו על ידי תפילותיו שהתפלל עליה, וכמו שאמרו, he brings the גמרא, שמא יקדמנו אחר ברחמי, זהו מוצא. That is מוצא. That's not necessarily going to end well, right? It could end up in a bitter ending, right? ואז אין זיווגו עולה יפה. Then it's not going to necessarily be a good one. Right? And he brings the story that we mentioned of Rava that tells this person, he says, don't daven like that. It's not a proper way of davening. Now, the kavanatam, if you are only marrying this wife because you stormed the heavens to marry this specific woman, and she happens to not be your bat zug, she's not bat mazal, then שמא תועילו לראות סימן יפה בזיווגו, יתחזק נמי בתפילתו, שמא תועילו לראות סימן יפה בזיווגו. Maybe the tefillah is going to work, that you will see a siman yafe, right? Now, וידוע, he says it's known, שכשאין הזיווג עולה יפה, when the match is not such a good match, אם באים לידי עניות, if they undergo difficulties, whether financially or Chaim Shel Sar, it's going to be difficult for a woman, right? Well, however this goes south, it's going to be painful. Therefore, he understands back to our first pasuk, Eshet Chayil mi yimsa. If a woman is a tzaddiket, is a Eshet Chayil, no one is going to be a yimtza. No one could get her if she is somebody else's batzug. Hashem does not let somebody else to get her with their tefillah, because then she's going to undergo all these difficulties. Hashem doesn't allow that to happen, right? In other words, when a person does the right thing, like Sarah Imenu, Hashem gives them a protection that other people cannot affect their mazal, so to speak, in the world. Hashem gives you a shield of Yisurim that other people with their tefillah, with their ayin hara or ayin tova or whatnot, they cannot affect your life with that. And that's basically the gist of what he's going to say in the next 2 pages before he finishes this pasuk. But I want to just end with one important yesod in this. Matzah or motze. Matzah is present tense. It's past tense rather. Motze is present tense. Matzah means someone that found. Motze means someone that's looking to find. Is finding right now, right? So I think one of the deep, and this is brought in Mefarashim, maybe a little bit different, but the point of it is, they would ask him after marriage, they would say, Matzah or motze. And the point was the most genius piece of advice you could give to a chatan and kala. Right? The way I say it is, before marriage, open your eyes wide open, and after marriage, shut them tight. Right? And that's exactly what they were saying. It said, Matzah isha, if a person gets married and says, Matzati, I found, it's past tense, I found my zivug. This is it. Now, there's no other woman or man in the world. This is my partner. This is my spouse. And we're going to make the best out of it. I always say around the Ketuva room, the Chatan Tish, I always say, we say bracha under chuppah, say, Sameach, Tesamach, Re'im Ahuvim, Kesamechacha yitzircha began Eden mikedem. Say, Hashem, make them happy. This couple, like Adam and Chava in Gan Eden. Why Adam and Chava? Why not Sarah and Rivka? They were the Rivka and Yitzchak. They were the best Shalom Bayit ever, right? Avraham and Sarah were pretty good. Yaakov. Why not anybody else? Why Adam and Chava? Adam and Chava actually had major problems, right? Because she killed him, right? Almost, or right? She did. So, and she killed herself. What didn't work out so well, you would say. You know what the reason is? I say this, someone pops up and says, yeah, because they didn't have mother-in-laws. I was like, oh my gosh, can't say that. All right, but the truth is, because there was nobody else to compare. There's only one couple. That's real simcha. And you know, this is it, right? You open your eyes before well, and you shut them tight afterwards. That's matzah or motzeh. If you are motzeh, that you got married, now you're, okay, now you have someone to compare the whole world with, right? Is she as good as her and her and her, or him? Is he as good as him and him? Then Gehinam. What kind of life is that, right? Motzeh ani mar mimavet et haisha. It's going to be more bitter than death, because there's no way in the world that you're going to be happy if you're constantly comparing your life with other people. And again, it says it by wife and by husband, but it is much more than that. It's like the car and the house and the lifestyle and this and that. It gives you one of the most important characteristics of a Jew. That you do your due diligence well before you do something, but when you do it, you have to do it with confidence and you don't look back. You make the best out of the life that you have at every given juncture in your life, and that makes a person truly happy. Bezrat Hashem. Amen.